Hey, we have news on this episode of Varsity 360. Not only do we have three of us in here at the First Pacific Financial Studio in downtown Vancouver, we just got some scheduling updates for the return of crossover games next season in the 4A and 3A Greater St. Helens League.
Yeah, so at the district meeting this week, and we had a story this week by Meg did a story on it. They're going to bring back the mid-season crossovers within the 3A and the 4A Greater St. Helens League. They used to play these games in October in past seasons, but there were just a lot of lopsided games between some of the 4A teams and 3A teams. But because of parity, a little bit more parity that's happening in the league, and also the fact that the 4A teams especially are having a really, really hard time filling out non-league games in October, that so they're going to play in week 6. And the way it works out is it's going to be for the top 4 teams in each league. In the 4A, there's only 4 teams. In the 3A, there's 6, so only the top 4 are going to participate in this crossover on week 6. 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, based on the previous year's schedule. And yeah, I think it's a good fix for a situation that was becoming increasingly difficult. And I think we know it from what Skyview has been experiencing this year about how hard it is to field some of these October non-league games.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, just looking at what would have hypothetically been the matchups this year between, an Evergreen Camas and then Skyview and Kelso. We already saw Battleground and Prairie play. That's a natural district rivalry right there, as is Union and Mountain View. So I think from that perspective, it makes sense. As we talked about before going on air, it's sometimes tricky for those bigger schools in particular to fill out their non-league schedules down here, and Oregon games aren't always available. So I think this is a common sense fix that makes sense for everyone involved.
Well, I think anything that serves to address some of the difficulties that have been coming up, especially this year, and especially for teams like Skyview, which has had to, I think they've already traveled over 1,400 miles, and they're not alone. You've seen the 4A teams go as far as northern Idaho to fill out their schedules. And I came up with a wacky idea that maybe would work, maybe it wouldn't, but is it time to start considering having the 4 4A Greater St. Helens League teams play each other twice in the league season, do a home and home. Then you've got, 6 of your weeks filled with league games, and that, you stay local. It sort of addresses a little bit of the uniqueness of the situation, whereas you're sort of isolated as a pod of 4A schools down here in this corner of the state, and I don't know. I think that makes sense, but obviously the people in charge, the ADs, haven't gone that far yet.
It feels weird. I mean, when you think about it, because high school teams typically don't play each other twice in a season. It's not unheard of. The Northwest Conference 1A up in the Bellingham area with like Mount Baker and Meridian and Nooksack Valley. They've kind of had the same situation where there's 4 1A teams up there sort of isolated in Northwest, and they've kind of done this. They're going to play each other twice. And actually it kind of, I think, helped lead the discussion to the new Week 10 alignment, where it's statewide crossovers as opposed to the crossover, because that 1A league was so strong. They had so many good teams, and they were beating up on each other. And so when it came to how many of them actually got through, some of those teams were eliminated, didn't get a chance to play. So, but anyway, that's how they've done it. They just did 6 league games with playing each other twice. So not unheard of, but it definitely would be odd. And I'd be curious to know what the coaches would think about having to get ready and play Union Camas twice, or Camas and Skyview twice, or what that would look like.
Well, like selfishly from our perspective as storytellers and journalists, we would love to lean into the revenge angle, or they clashed in week 5, and now it's time for revenge for the team that maybe lost a competitive first run. But we can only hope.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I think the way they set it up, I think it was smart. Like if you just told me they're going to play week 6 and they're going to cross over, I would sit there and go, well, we've kind of seen that. There was, I think a couple of years ago we had Skyview, and Skyview was like a state quarterfinalist team. They were playing Heritage in October, and Heritage was struggling back then. It's a 3A program, And, there was it was 42-0 by the second quarter. It just, it wasn't really a good matchup. But I think the way they did it, where ones are playing ones and twos are playing twos and threes and fours, I think that kind of sets it up so we won't see as much of that going forward. So that's kind of a nice solution. But I think the biggest thing, it just alleviates some headaches for travel and scheduling. And we talked about Skyview and their miles. I think Battleground and Camas last year both put up around 1,400 miles to fill out their non-league schedule. So it's a time suck, and it's an expense that's got to be dealt with, and then it's just hard because then you've got, usually it's a home and home situation, right? So you got to have that team agree to come all the way here. Luckily for our teams, Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene decide, all right, we'll go ahead and make that 6-hour trip and come down because you guys went last year. But it's a difficult way to align that. And so I think the deeper you get into the season for the 4As, really, really hard to find non-league games in October.
Yeah, we all like a nice long road trip, but not too much. So, all right, Tim, why don't you tell us about the game we're going to play today?
All right, we're going to play a little game. That's why we got 3 people here, because we kind of wanted to mix up some of our answers. So what we're going to do is we're going to answer 5 questions, since it's the mid-season point of the season. We're going to do 5 questions that kind of we're making predictions about what's going to happen by the end of the season. So there are 5 questions. They're yes or no questions. But the twist is we've got cards here, and we're going to rank our yes-nos from 5 being the ones that we're most confident in, and 1s being the ones we're least confident in. And then we'll come back at the end of the season and we'll see who scored the most points. I guess the ideal is if you got 5 down to 1, 15 is a perfect score. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how we do here. All right, you guys ready?
We are ready, yeah.
All right. First question is, will we see a league tiebreaker after week 9 in any of our leagues? Now, over the past 10 years or so, it's kind of a 50-50 option. I think we had one in 2016 and 2017, and then 2022 and 2023. I think one of those years we had a couple, like 2A and 3A.
Yep.
So it's kind of a 50-50 chance from that perspective. Will we see a league tiebreaker through Kansas plan after the end of the regular season, any of our leagues? And who wants to go first?
I'm going to put this at a 4 and say yes. To me, this is kind of a question of if there are any leagues where there are more playoff caliber teams than spots available, and I think there is. When you look at the 3A this year, talking about between Kelso, Evergreen, Prairie, and now Heritage that continues to rise, they'll be fighting for 3 spots, which means there could be an odd team out there. It's interesting that, Kelso's already beaten Evergreen, so I think that could potentially, make things interesting late in the year. And, historically that kind of has been the league that's been the one that we've seen a lot of tiebreakers between those same teams. And then when you look at the 2As right now, Washougal stands alone at the top, but you have 3 more teams tied for second in Woodland, Ridgefield, and River, and another 3 tied for third in Hawkinson, Morris, and Bay. I was talking to Dave Hayjack after their win last week over Washougal, and he said, don't be surprised if we see a 3-team tie for first place. I know you guys don't want to hear that, but, it could happen. So, and I think with just how crazy that league has been, I think it's very possible. So I will put that as a 4 and say it's very possible that could happen.
I will see your yes and raise you a point and go 5 on this one, because for all the reasons you just explained, I think we're headed there. The 3A Greater St. Helens League, you talked about Evergreen. I think for us, they were our consensus favorite, and they already have a loss. Kelso, I think what we learned from last week's result with Kelso beating Evergreen is Kelso is just going to do what they do all the time, and that is be physical and run the ball, and that's going to always have the Highlanders in contention. What I think we also learned last week is that Prairie's week 3 loss to Battleground, for how lopsided that was more of an aberration. I think the Falcons are proving that they're better than they were on that night in isolation. I think they're whenever you have someone like a playmaker like Devin Viju and a stable of receivers that he can trust, like Tommy Vick and Alex Blakesley and Jackson Kimball, that Prairie Prairie's, I could see them beating Kelso on I guess I'll be tonight. Yeah. And so you start throwing all these scenarios around where a team beats another, and then that team that loses beats a team that beat that other team and everything. That sort of was what we got used to in the 3A Greater St. Helens League. And like you said, with a Ascendant Heritage team, I just think we're head there again.
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with the yes, and I'm going to also put it as a 4. So the Trico is getting 4 guaranteed spots to Week 10, and they might pick up a 5th. It was what the center AD, Matt Cook, told me. There's like some at-large sort of wild card berths that are still out there, so they could pick up a 5th. But I agree with you with the 2A. I think there's just this whole parity thing going on there. So they're going to get 4, and I kind of hope that there maybe isn't a tiebreaker, because the top 3 go to Week 10 automatically. The 4th has got to play a crossover mini game with somebody from the 2A Evergreen Conference. So last year, River was the 5th team, and they crossed over and played Aberdeen on a Tuesday, played a half a game. So if you had a tiebreaker, and it's involving that 4th team, you have to have the tiebreaker, and then that whoever's the 4th team's got to go play this mini game up someplace, and I'm like trying to figure how that's all going to work. Do they do the tiebreaker on Monday and the mini game on Wednesday, and it'll just be crazy. So, but again, I think the parity involved there. I think again the season that Heritage is putting together kind of throws another possibility in the 3 spots in the 3A, and really even the 4A is a possibility, because we're going to get more to that later. But I kind of don't know who the 2 is out of the 4A. So, we could see a whole mess of tiebreakers.
Well, would those all be on the same day, roughly?
Yeah, they usually do it on Monday after the season. Yeah. And I think the last time that we had the 2 of them, they were both on Monday. I think you did the one at, was it at Washougal?
No, it was out at District Stadium.
District Stadium.
Yeah.
We were, I was out at the 3A one at Doc Harris. So, yeah, it was, it'll probably be all on Monday.
I've never covered one, so I kind of hope that we have one this year.
See what that chaos is like. They're fun because they go quickly, right. And for 2 of the teams, I remember it was a 3-team tiebreaker. So 2, I think it was Ridgefield, Washougal, and Hudson's Bay, and Hudson's Bay ended up, I think, winning on a missed kick over Ridgefield to get to the championship against Washougal, and then Washougal won on like a 25-yard touchdown pass from Holden B to, I think it was Sam Evers. And it's just going from not knowing if your season is going to continue to the jubilation of we did it, we're still playing. And
the 2A, they did like a 25-yard Kansas play.
Yes.
Possession kind of thing?
Yes,
right?
yeah.
The 3A, they did a longer possession. I think it started from like the 35 or the 40, and each team had a chance to have 2 possessions. But even that went quickly, because I think in both the 2 tiebreakers that happened, it was like the first team didn't score, the second team scored, and then the first team didn't score, and it was over. It was pretty quick. I kind of remember the Kelso and Evergreen, and I think Prairie was involved. It still happened pretty quickly. So, it's very, very hectic, very crazy. A lot of intensity to those things. They're fun.
Nice. Let chaos reign.
Yeah. All right. Number 2 is again kind of alluding to what we were just talking about. So, who's the number 2? If we think Camas is still the number 1 from the 4A Greater St. Helens League, who's the number 2? Is Skyview going to be that other playoff team? So, if you go back in history, Steve Kaiser, I think, took over the Skyview program in 2004. Starting in 2005 to last year, the Storm made the Week 10 playoffs every year except 2017, and then there was the pandemic year. But 2017, they made it every year from 2005 to 2024, except for 2017. Do they make it to the Week 10 playoffs, or does Union or Battleground sneak in again?
I'll take this, and I will only say it with the lowest confidence because I haven't seen Skyview. In fact, none of us will until I see them on Saturday at their game that they scheduled late just this week against Chief South. But I'm going to say no with the least amount of confidence, and I might completely change my mind after seeing them on Saturday because frankly, I still don't know who the Storm are yet. We haven't seen them play in the area. We knew they were young. We knew they had it was going to be a work in progress with a new coaching staff, a new set of leaders, a new quarterback, and a brutal schedule where they're on the road playing against teams like, Eagle, who's going to be a state title contender in Idaho, and then taking on Puyallup and I think Graham Kapowson playoff teams. And so we knew that just by on the scores, the first half of the season for the Storm might not be indicative of where that team eventually ends up. But I've seen Battleground and I've seen Union, and I know those two teams are better than they were last year. And so just because of that, I think whoever wins the Battleground Union game is going to get that number 2 spot. But prove me wrong, Skyview. I mean, I think like with any team, the team they are in week 3 and week 4 is not the team that you can end up being in week 8 or week 9. So would I be completely surprised if Skyview does get in there? No, but based on what we've seen or haven't seen, I'm going to go with either the Tigers or the Titans.
Man, well, call me crazy, but I'm putting this at a 5, and I'm going to say that Skyview does make the playoffs, is that number 2 spot. It feels like, I am completely going out on a limb here because, like you said, we have not seen them. But I think they deserve a little bit of a benefit of the doubt for this crazy schedule that they've played so far. And, I hope next year when it comes time to make a new schedule that they try to find a little more balance because it worked for them last year, obviously. But this is a tough situation for any first-year head coach to step into, obviously. But no, I just think when you look at those first 4 opponents, Graham Kapowson beat O'Day in week 1. Look what Puyallup did to Sumner last week, the reigning 4A state champ. So I really I feel like until Skyview falls out of that number 2 spot, I feel like it's still theirs until proven otherwise. I will say that both Union and Battleground, like you said, have played better this year. I do think maybe some of that early season buzz has tempered just a little bit based on these last 2 weeks. But I will say Union is still much improved and just, they've lost 3 games by a combined 4 points. Battleground had a tough one. You saw them lose narrowly to Cascade Christian. They had a chance against Post Falls. So I think those games are going to be a lot closer this year, but I still think it's Skyview until proven otherwise.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going, but I'm much less confident in that. I'm going to say Skyview does. And again, if you would ask me this 2 weeks ago, I probably would have given you a different answer with a different number. Battleground first 3 weeks, at least from the results, they look pretty good. They rolled over an Eisenhower team that they played a close game last year. They beat what I thought was a pretty good Prairie team fairly handily. But these last 2 weeks, they're struggling to find, get their offense on track. And so it's kind of like, I don't completely know what the Tigers have as they head into league play. Again, Union had a lot of tough luck, tough hard losses, I still think one of those teams is going to find a way through. I watched Skyview against Graham Kapowson on video. They got some players. Again, they're young, and it's just sustaining. They have to kind of like have. They lack sort of what I see the big playmaker that they've had, like Gavin Packer. Somebody can make an explosive play on special teams or a big play. They have to be sort of methodical. They have to move downfield. And against a team like Graham Kapowson or Puyallup, that's really hard, and some of these other teams as well. So they can be a completely different team at the end of October that we saw in September. And that schedule that the Skyview played would have been really hard on last year's Skyview team. It was the same schedule, but taking it on the road would have been different. So I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say Skyview, no. I'm going to, just because I like variety, and I hope that maybe Union or Battleground squeaks in there, we get a little difference, but I'm going to say no for Skyview, but I'm going to say it much less confidently with the 1. All right, third question. Heritage, off to an amazing start. It's like a seasons of first time since a long time. Timberwolves are 5-0, heading for 6-0. They play Mountain View this week. Does Heritage break through and capture one of the 3 spots to Week 10 playoffs and make the playoffs for the first time since 2007? This first time they made it, or 9 or something like that? A long time. So do the Timberwolves move on to the Week 10 playoffs? What do you guys got?
I'll start this. I'm putting this at a no, but I'm not confident in this at all. This is a really tough one for me because, on one hand, like you said, we've seen this 5-0 start from them. We've seen this amazing program turnaround, and I think, momentum is a real thing in high school football, so I think that'll serve them well over this next 4-game stretch. It's also, good for them that they get to play at McKenzie Stadium for all of their next 4 games. They don't have to go up to Kelso. They don't even have to go to District Stadium to play Prairie. But with only 3 teams, that would mean one of Evergreen, Kelso, or Prairie does not make Week 10. And right now, I just don't see how any of those 3 wouldn't make it. So that means to me that Heritage could end up being the odd team out. But again, it's really tough. I don't want to discredit anything that Heritage has done. They've been an awesome story this year, and they've surprised some people already. So who's to say that they couldn't do more? But as of right now, I think it's just, how do you knock one of those other 3 teams off? I couldn't quite get there, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb because maybe I've been drinking the purple Kool-Aid having seen them, but I'm going to also put a 2 confidence on this, but I'm going to say yes. They find a way, and who do they end up knocking off? I could see them with the way they play defense and the way they get after the quarterback. I could see them causing a problem for Prairie, much in the way that Battleground did. Battleground beat Prairie because they got Prairie's quarterback off his spot and basically had him running for his life. And Heritage was able to do that with some of the pressure they got on Shelton's quarterback. A Shelton game that I think was more lopsided than the final score was. Heritage ended up winning that 14-6. But Heritage turned the ball over twice in the red zone. That could have easily been 28-6. And who's to say that they don't, get into one of these low-scoring defensive, type of slugfests with a team like Kelso? I mean, Heritage, like many other teams, is a work in progress based a lot on, I think, the quarterback change that they made. You've seen Devon Granville take over the reins. And I think last week against Shelton was the first week where he played all the offensive snaps. And so I think he's a dynamic enough of a playmaker that I think he and his receivers are going to continue to grow in comfort with each other. And, I just think this Heritage team is playing with a ton of belief right now. And who's to tell them no? This is a group, when you talk about the senior class, that when they came into the program, they went, for those of them that played varsity as sophomores, they went 0-9. They started last season under the weight of a 22-game losing streak. They broke that and went 3-6, but kind of got some good feeling about the program. And then this year, those seniors are the ones that are really saying, we take it seriously, our mission of creating a winner here at Heritage. You ask the seniors, they didn't transfer, they stayed together, they're doing this together. And now, the feeling on that sideline after they won last week to guarantee a 5-0 start for the first time in program history, they've guaranteed a winning record this year. And so I just think the vibes are good at Heritage, and they might shock the world. All
right. So both of my kids are Heritage graduates, so I am sort of contractually obligated to say yes, we'll make it, and I'm going to go with a 3.
Nice.
So I think the hurdles that the Timberwolves are going to face is one. It's kind of funny because I did the preview for Heritage at the start of the season. I talked with Coach Kevin Peterson, and he's kind of spelling. He's like looking at the schedule, going, okay, it's like, we started last year 2-0, and then we lost to River Ridge up there, but we didn't really play very well. And we think we can play better. And they beat River Ridge this year, and then they went to Shelton, and he said, the Shelton game was just a mess, and we just made mistakes after mistakes. Shouldn't have lost that game. We think we can win that one, and then now we're 5-0, and now they're. He kind of talked about the setup, the way it's kind of played out, and and so they've been feeding this to their kids, and they've been talking about this, and I think this is something that they're taking the opportunity to do. Who they beat, I don't know. I don't know who they beat. Maybe Prairie, maybe somebody. Maybe it's in a tiebreaker. Maybe there's a 3-way tiebreaker, and they gotta win it in tiebreak. But I'm going to say yes to the Timberwolves. The thing because I think also they're getting better. They're getting better because again the quarterback situation, they were kind of splitting it early with Owen Daly and Devon Granville, and Devon kind of took over the starting job against Kent Lake a week ago, and then he was the guy again this year. But again, I think they have a capable backup now with this Owen Daly in case injury or whatever happens. KJ Clark is playing more of a role in their running game. It gives them another dynamic. And Dakari Bradford, Coach Peterson talked about his offseason and his growth. They really haven't tapped fully into that yet, and I think part of that was some of the quarterback. So I think they're getting better as they continue to move through, even though they're 5-0. I think the traps that they're going to fall into is don't get caught up on 5-0 and 6-0 because it doesn't really mean anything until weeks 7, 8, 9. Those are the games that you really are going to want to be focused on. The other thing too is they can't do what they did last week and turn the ball over and make mistakes and penalties. They got to play clean. And then they have to also avoid injuries as well. So some of the key spots. But I think given all those things, Timberwolves find a way. They're going to get it done.
All right, let's hear it for the Timberwolves.
All right, question number 4. The 2A Greater St. Helens League, we talked about them already. Last year they sent 5 teams to the Week 10 playoffs, and the league went 0-5. Does the 2A Greater St. Helens League, one of those 4 entries, that are potentially 4, 3 for sure, and then with the crossover up north could be 4, one of those teams win a Week 10 game this year? And it's again, you have to remember the playoff format of Week 10 is different than it has been. In past years, the league champion would go play, the 3rd place team or 4th place team from the Evergreen Conference. They're playing Aberdeen or Black Hills or something. It's a favorable matchup. Now it's a statewide thing, and there's a seeding committee. I think last year Woodland got sort of bit by the matchup bug. They played a pretty good team and ended up losing. I think one of the teams that played the closest was Mark Morris. I think they had to go all the way up to East Valley, and they actually played a very competitive game over there. Mm-hmm. But all 5 of the teams lost. This year, well, how we look at the 2A Greater St. Helens League, do they get a win in Week 10?
I will start this, and I might go with 3 because on one hand, history does tend to repeat itself, and the league went 0-4 last year, but I see current first place team Washougal winning a Week 10 game. I think they do that because of their senior leadership. I think they do that because of how well they run the ball. I think you have a playmaker who's a difference maker in Royce Jones. I think that was a huge win for them to get by Ridgefield. And I think that's going to lead to a continued increase in confidence as they get down the home stretch of the season. So am I bullish on anyone else from the league winning a Week 10 game? No, but is the league going to get skunked again? I say not with Washougal.
Yeah, I'm also at a 3. I think this was probably the most toss-up of all of them. I think, when you look at last year, and you mentioned it, I think not being able to just play in District 4 anymore is definitely tougher for the 2A GSHL. The fact that Mark Morris, though, was competitive tells me that sometimes the the final seeding and the matchups, there are going to be opportunities, obviously, for a team to break through and get a win. I also think there's a case to be made that maybe the top 4 or 5 of the 2A GSHL is overall a little bit stronger this year than it was last year, especially when you look at, River kind of coming up, and I think Mark Morris, even though their record might not reflect it, still is widely regarded as a team around the league that is getting better. And then, like you said, with Washougal, I think they're improved from a year ago. I mean, I was looking at their results last year. They went scoreless in losses to Woodland and Ridgefield. So I think it's already proven itself that they're improved. And then I think Ridgefield is still improving as well. And we can't ever sleep on Woodland. So I think overall those top 5 are better this year. And I think hopefully a matchup swings their way. But I think somebody will go out there and get it done.
All right, I'm going to be the contrarian here. So sometimes when you have parity in the league, it means, well, sometimes it can help because you're playing competitive games every week. Sometimes it kind of shows you that maybe everyone is just kind of like a little bit, from a statewide perspective, just a little bit. I think that's where they got caught up last year. And so the matchups didn't really help them out there. So the thing about that I look at the 2A Greater St. Helens League this year is, when you look at the non-league games. And again, it's week 1 and week 2, and a lot can happen between 2 and week 10. But Washougal went 1-1. I think River was the only one to go undefeated because they only played 1 game because they didn't play the game against the Columbia White Salmon. Mark Morris went 0-2. Woodland went 1-1, losing to La Center. And even like Washougal, like again, there's things I like about Washougal. There's things that I think it's like a lot of things to like, especially with Royce Jones. But when you kind of go back, you say they won week 1 and they beat Mountain View, and we were like, oh wow, Washougal must be pretty good. That one hasn't aged particularly well over the last few weeks, and then they lost to Prairie in week 2 fairly convincingly, even though I think Royce Jones went off for 200 yards.
Yeah, because he had to, because their quarterback went down in the late second quarter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but then you're like, oh, okay, well, we think Prairie's pretty good. But then Prairie loses to Battleground, again, fairly convincingly, and then Battleground loses back-to-back games. So it's kind of like everything kind of tempers down, at least on the non-league thing. So I'm going to say they again get stuck with the matchup bug. I think is the committee that looks to see these things, they're going to see a lot of really good 2A teams from Anacortes to Tumwater to all the usuals. And it's going to put even the number 1 from the 2A Greater St. Helens League in a sort of they don't match it up 1 through 32. It's not the way they kind of do it, but in that sort of theory, they're probably going to be like a 10 seed, 12. It's going to be like a 11-17 kind of, or 11-18 kind of seeding thing. And so I'm going to say no, but again, I'm not super confident with that. So I'm going to say no and a number 2.
All right, we're through 3 out of 4.
All right, last one. So, again, this is kind of a law of averages. It's kind of a 50-50 thing if you go back over the last 15 years or so. We've had teams make it to the semifinals, state semifinals. At least one local team make it to the state semifinals. Obviously, last year we had 2 state finalists, and the year before that, Seton 23 made it. And then we had, Camas in a state title in 19, and we had Union and Hawkinson in 18, and Hawkinson in 17, and Camas in 16, and then Camas in 13, and Skyview in 11. So if you go back about halfway, we've had teams make it to the state semifinals. Do we have a local team making it through a state semifinal?
My confidence level is at a 1 for this, and I hope it's not too reactionary just based on what we've seen through the first 5 weeks now. But to me, it's I think of years past when we've seen teams that we thought kind of had that type of potential to only fall short. And, I think it just kind of speaks to just how difficult of a task it is to reach the state semifinals. You need not only a combination of talent and skill, maybe a little bit of good fortune along the way, and a team that's peaking at the right time. I would say, last year was, I think, the 4th year I've covered football in Clark County, and that was only the 2nd time that we've seen a state semifinalist. And, I think that Camas and Seton team both were pretty special. so far, it's been an interesting non-league for both. I'm kind of still a little bit up in the air on if a team could make that deep of a run. One though that I think is an interesting one to keep looking at is La Center, who is now 4-1 and very nearly 5-0, if not for a loss to Monty, which was also a state semifinalist a year ago. So a few teams in contention, but I just think as of right now, I'm not sure a team makes that far. Maybe the quarterfinals, not sure about the semifinals.
Yeah, I just don't see it in the cards this year. I like you said, and I think I'm pretty confident on this. Again, I would love to be proven wrong. We always, I think, get a thrill out of seeing a team go on a postseason run, and but it's so hard. It's so hard to do, and I think things just came together so well for Camas and Seton Catholic last year. Seton Catholic, you had that amazing senior class of playmakers surrounding a top tier quarterback in Colton Gesser, and of course Colton is still there, but Seton has spent the first half of the year kind of, they're getting better every year, but they have a couple of losses, and so can they improve at a kind of a meteoric rise between now and the postseason? Well, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's just so hard to become the Final Four. For Camas, I think it's sort of a similar situation. They had playmakers all over the field last year, and not saying they aren't good, but you just don't get that sense of inevitability. I think you approach last year's team kind of in both cases at Seton and Camas of knowing they had a window and that this was a year that could be special. I think in both cases, and I think both coaches would say, yeah, we entered the year having to answer some questions, whether it's, for Camas, who was going to be their quarterback, who would emerge as playmakers. Same thing at Seton, who would emerge to take on those roles. And so I just think, given the tall mountain it is to climb to make it to state semifinal, that it's maybe next year, but not for me, not this year. Again, would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah, we'd love to go to Husky Stadium. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think both teams were undefeated going into the state championship last year, right? And already both have 2 losses. So that's on paper that could be tough.
Yeah. So I'm going to agree. Well, I guess I agree with everyone, but I put my 5 on this one, that the answer is going to be no. And again, I guess it's sort of the same thing that you were talking about, Micah. So hard, so difficult. It's actually kind of surprised me about how many teams that we've actually seen locally make it through. 2 years ago, Seton, I think, was a surprise for us to make it that far. But again, I think you talk about how difficult. I think Camas last year, in making it to the semifinals, had a little bit sort of a comfortable route to that. But Seton Catholic had to fight to get to that semifinal game. They had a quarterfinal game at Life Christian. Was very challenging. So even a really, really good program, a team that Seton Catholic had last year, they had to fight to get there. So I mean, it kind of shows just how challenging it is. Again, I think the best shot, I think, for our teams is in the 1A. I would agree with Will on the center. Because they're 4-1 and they nearly beat a pretty good Monty team. I saw Cascade Christian play against Battleground, and I was like, that's a really good 1A program they got there. And then there's the usual,
Royal,
and all those other, And so I think it's not just what we've seen from the center, but the path is maybe a little bit easier because they only have 24 teams that make it to the crossovers as opposed to 32. I don't think either La Center or Seton is going to position themselves, even if they run out the table, to get the bye into the quarterfinals that they got last year. So that means it's one more step that they got to cross to get to that semifinal game. But I just think the way the matchups are going to, because of that, the way the matchups are going to, set up, that there are some really good 1A teams. And so, again, we would love, because we love covering high school football deep in November and into December, but I don't think this year it's looking really good at this point.
All right. Well, again, we'll revisit these later on and see how right or how wrong we were. I'm sure. There'll be a lot of people hoping I'm wrong on some of my predictions, but that's fine. That's why we do these. But anyway, this was fun. It's great having three of us in here.
Absolutely.
But
great idea, Tim.
All right, we will see you out on the field this weekend as the season now passes its halfway point and enters the home stretch. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you for tuning in, everybody.